A Steam Seeker's Adventure, The Spiral, An Introduction to Atomic Structure and the Periodic Table, written by Tania Torchlight. Power failure imminent. The rain hadn't stopped in 5 days. Thick clouds strangled the sunlight over Truthspire Castle, casting long gray shadows on the dome-shaped greenhouse and snuffing out the usual stream of energy into the solar panels. The wind turbines sat motionless, their great blades frozen mid-rotation like silent sentinels. Inside the castle's central lab, Dr. Archie Gearsmith stood hunched over a holographic blueprint of the castle's energy systems. His copper goggles reflected the flickers of failure, emergency lights blinking on the console, low battery warnings, system timeouts, cooling failures, dangerously close to critical loss. A heavy dread settled in his chest. He had built this sanctuary to withstand anything, but nature's relentless assault was proving a formidable foe for his power system. The silence was dreadful, interrupted only by the low beeping of warning systems, a mournful symphony of impending doom. The 7 of us gathered around the main table in Dr. Gearsmith's lab, our faces bathed in the pulsing, ominous shadows of red light. I, Tania Torchlight, had my notebook in hand, ready to record everything with the hope that the truth seekers would quickly reveal a solution, and I could once again report on their miraculous success. But I had my doubts this time, serious doubts. The situation was critical, and the air was thick with unspoken anxiety. The team gasped as the main console beeped and flashed the terrifying countdown. Power failure. In 23 hours, 18 minutes.
How much energy is left?
Rose asked, her voice tight with concern.
Below 12%.
Gearsmith said, his voice low and deep from the weight of the predicament.
The servers have switched to emergency mode. If we lose refrigeration, we lose the gene banks. The water filtration units are already operating on backup. We won't last another day.
He ran a trembling hand through his snow-white curls, a gesture of profound worry.
We're out of time. Wind and solar can't carry us anymore. The batteries are almost depleted. There's only one option left.
The room went still, each breath held in collective apprehension.
Fission,
he announced, the word hanging in the air.
We have to activate the reactor. It's the only option.
Tinky blinked, a flicker of apprehension in her sparkling eyes.
But it's not ready.
No.
Gearsmith agreed, his gaze softening slightly as he met her worried expression.
Not without the neutrons to kickstart it. But I have a resource I have never mentioned.
Mission briefing. Operation Plumbum. The castle shook faintly as a thunderclap cracked overhead, a violent punctuation to their dire conversation. Dr. Gearsmith motioned for us to pull up our chairs around the large monitor in the corner of his laboratory.
The time has come sooner than expected,
Dr. Gearsmith said, his voice regaining a note of resolve.
We thought we needed stable, dependable energy for our databank upgrades, but now we need it for our survival. Nuclear fission will provide our solution.
The team's gazes shifted to the giant display screen. A 3D rendering of a strange vertical structure emerged. It looked like a spiral tower, with chambers arranged around a central column, mesmerizing and daunting.
This,
said Gearsmith, pointing to the screen,
is La Spirale Elementaire, a defunct atomic research facility disguised as a warehouse, built by my late mentor, Dr. Lucien Cobalt.
He bowed his head for a moment, a silent tribute to his dear friend. He smiled weakly and continued.
Each chamber holds enlarged simulations of each specific element, billions of times larger than life. Hydrogen to oganesson, every known element, in its natural state.
So it's a periodic vault of sorts?
Thomas asked with unbridled excitement, his eyes gleaming. He leapt out of his chair and moved closer to the screen for a better look, practically vibrating with anticipation.
Please tell me you need us to go there.
Dr. Gearsmith nodded solemnly. Thomas clenched his fist in victory, mouthing yes with boyish glee before falling back into his chair, a manic energy about him. Dr. Gearsmith pointed to the bottom of the spiral.
Your goal, the Plum Bum Room. This is one of the most stable elements in existence. You can easily pluck off a few neutrons to bring back to Truthspire.
Aria Ironheart raised an eyebrow, a hint of skepticism in her usually jovial expression.
Sounds simple enough.
Which means it's not simple at all.
Rose tapped her foot and bit her lip, her brow furrowed. She knew that true simplicity in science was rarely simple.
I know enough about chemistry to know this could turn out bad.
Adamus laughed, a joyful, slightly unhinged chuckle.
If by bad you mean explosive and dangerous, then let's go. I'm all in.
Dr. Gearsmith cleared his throat.
The building is unstable, Rose. You are correct. Every room is an exact simulation of an element's behavior. So, obviously, there are entire sections you'll want to avoid. Whatever you do...
Gearsmith's eyes darkened, his voice dropping to a grave warning.
Do not enter an alkali chamber. The elements there, lithium, sodium, potassium, are dangerously reactive with water. And since your bodies are mostly water, even a drop of perspiration or the moisture in your breath
Would make us explode.
Atomus Goodfellow finished cheerfully, his fingers splaying in jazz hands. A mischievous glint danced in his eyes.
Correct,
Said Gearsmith, a weary sigh escaping him. From across the room, Tinky Copperlock muttered a low grumble.
Why can't we ever have missions that involve, I don't know, strawberries?
She imagined plump red berries, a stark contrast to the volatile elements they now faced. Dr. Gearsmith offered a strained smile.
Because strawberries don't power reactors, Copperlock.
Sir,
Hector said, stretched back in his chair and looking a little too comfortable for such an emergency, his gaze fixed on the holographic display.
if there was a way we could get some of that lithium while we were there.
Rose stood, hands on her hips, her voice sharp with indignation.
No, you heard him. We could explode.
But we could increase our battery power.
Hector replied, a glint of stubborn ambition in his eyes.
As a backup, in case the reactor doesn't work.
The old doctor shook his head, a firm refusal.
It's too dangerous. And besides, there isn't time. The flight alone is going to take several hours.
And in this weather, I'm not even sure we can fly.
Arya said, peering out the window at the dark, churning skies surrounding them, her usual confidence tempered by the harsh reality of the storm. Although I loved watching the action unfold, I wasn't loving the thought of tagging along. Should I stay behind with you, Doctor? I asked, hoping for a reprieve. He shook his head.
No, you need to have a front row seat. If this turns out, when this turns out to be a success, you'll want to know you wrote down everything just as it actually happened, because history loves an eyewitness. I work best alone anyway, and it'll take all my brainpower to keep this place running while you're away.
I slid my notebook into my backpack, a sense of foreboding settling over me. I was about to be part of the most dangerous mission in Truthspire history, but God was on our side. I just kept repeating that to myself. The countdown to power failure continued its silent descent, a relentless march toward darkness, and the storm outside showed no sign of ending. In less than 24 hours, Truthspire would go dark. Unless the truth seekers could brave La Spirale Elementaire and return with the fuel that could keep their castle alive. Into the storm. The team gathered in the temple, the soft glow of the stained glass windows muted by the oppressive clouds, to say a prayer. They joined hands, bowed their heads, and Dr. Gearsmith spoke with gravity and warmth, his voice a comforting anchor amidst the rising anxieties.
Dear Lord, guide our minds and steady our hearts. Protect the airship as it sails through stormy skies to the spiral. and let every challenge draw us closer to truth. May we seek wisdom with courage, serve with honor, and remember that even in storm and shadow, you are our light. In your holy name, amen.
Rain hammered the launch pad on top of the castle as the crew rushed through the downpour to Arya's latest accomplishment, the Tranquillum. She had recently made significant repairs and upgrades, and although she had tested it on short flights around the island, this would be its first official takeoff into a true tempest. The team trusted God and Arya, and their minds were so focused on the periodic vault that the fear of mid-flight failure didn't even cross their minds. They quickly huddled inside, checking gear, reviewing maps, and then settling in for the long, bumpy trip. As we took off, I stared out the porthole, my stomach fluttering with a mix of fear and excitement. Below, Truthspire's lights flickered again, a stark reminder of the mission. Without power, they'd lose years of work, dozens of cutting-edge experiments that could help mankind in so many ways. Their only clean water source, their connection to the outside world. Regaining their progress after a blackout would take years. This mission wasn't just important, it was everything. And so, with goggles fastened, notebooks secured, and hearts pounding with a shared purpose, we took off through the stormy skies, headed straight for a forgotten vault of ancient science, a mysterious atomic spiral, and a single room named after the most dependable element on Earth, plumbum. The blackout. Wind howled against the hull, a mournful lament. Lightning flashed in jagged blue streaks across the clouds, framing Tranquillum in electric light, briefly illuminating the churning chaos outside. Inside, gears and steam gauges ticked in harmony.
Looks like we might exit the storm up ahead.
Arya announced cheerfully.
It will be a smooth ride.
Suddenly the lights dimmed. The engine whined, a strained, dying groan. Monitors blinked out. A choked hiss sputtered from the boiler like a final breath. Then, silence.
No, 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 no!
Arya yelled, pounding her fist on the console in frustration.
The primary capacitor. It must have lost charge when Truthspire went into emergency mode.
A surge of self-reproach tightened her jaw. She had meticulously checked every system, but she hadn't even considered a power drain. Worry spread like a gas leak, infusing each of them with fear. But it passed quickly as instinct and training kicked in, overriding the initial panic.
We're losing altitude,
Barked Rose, peering at the gauges with narrowed eyes.
but we're over the Great Plains. No mountains, so we can coast.
Hector wiped the fog from his oversized goggles and studied the altimeter, his mind already calculating trajectories.
We've got warm thermals rising off the plains, natural uplift.
Arya nodded, a glimmer of hope in her eyes.
Combine that with this tailwind, and I'd say we've got maybe 15 minutes of flight time. Maybe more, if God's feeling generous.
Hector gritted his teeth, a wave of self-blame washing over him.
You think the capacitor's charge got diverted to emergency power for Truthspire? I'll have to fix that wiring when we get back. This is my fault.
A Thomas, ever practical in a crisis, dug through his bag.
Hector, no time for regrets. We've got to get this motor started again.
He pulled out a battery pack, its gleaming surface a beacon of potential.
Can you make this work as a capacitor substitute?
Hector grinned, a spark of his usual brilliance returning. He grabbed the battery pack and disappeared into the floor hatch, his movements swift and sure. A moment later came the sound of metal banging, a tiny but healthy explosion that made everyone flinch, and then the unmistakable hum of redirected current pulsing through Tranquillum. Arya pushed the start button and then chug-a-lug! The engine sprang to life, a triumphant roar that filled the cabin. Gauges surged, lights flickered back on. Hector's voice crackled over the speaker, a hint of pride in his tone.
She'll hold, but just barely. We can glide her the rest of the way, and I'll do more work once we land.
Arrival. The spiral. As the storm finally thinned, a colossal shape emerged from the swirling clouds. La spirale élémentaire, or as the truth seekers now called it, the spiral. Built long ago, its surface shimmered with rust and soot, a monument to forgotten science. Windows were shattered, gaping holes in its metallic skin, solar panels scorched, useless husks. The rooftop landing pad groaned under Tranquillum's weight as they touched down with a jolt, the impact reverberating through the ship. Ancient dust curled up around them, clinging to the grimy metal. No lights, no welcoming beacons, just silence, a profound stillness that felt heavy with age and secrets and danger.
This place.
Tinky whispered, her voice barely audible, a shiver running down her spine. She felt an unsettling presence.
It's haunted.
Of course.
Laughed Adamus, his boisterous cheer attempting to cut through the eerie atmosphere.
Haunted with the mysteries of the periodic table. It's my favorite ghost story.
No signs of functioning security.
Muttered Arya, her gaze sweeping over the roof of the desolate structure.
That means the alkali chambers might be unsealed. If the elements were exposed.
They all knew the risk. The spiral held not just knowledge, but unstable power. Sodium, potassium, elements that could ignite with a single drop of moisture, and radiation. That sneaky, invisible danger that could infect them without their knowledge or consent. They climbed out of Tranquillum and approached the main entrance. Its creaky iron door loomed ahead like a monstrous mouth waiting to swallow them whole. Rose's heart thudded in her chest as Thomas jogged forward without thinking, without proper precautions, his usual impulsive nature asserting itself. He unlatched the metal holster and pulled. Click! Screech! The door opened, and the team, with a collective breath of trepidation, followed Adamus inside. Inside the spiral, an old metallic odor greeted the truth seekers the moment the iron door scraped shut behind them, leaving them in complete blackness. Arya flicked on her flashlight. The beam swept across the top floor, cutting through the dark. There were only 2 chambers on the top floor. She leaned over the railing, her light swooshing in a circular motion as she highlighted the floors below, revealing the dizzying descent. The interior of La Spirale Élémentaire unfolded as a single, endless ramp that curled downward like a nautilus shell. Each tier was lined with arched openings, some wide open, revealing glimpses of glowing orbs, some barred with thick jail-like doors, and some locked tight behind riveted steel hatches. Thomas raced ahead in excitement, his footsteps echoing in the vast space.
This is unbelievable. It's arranged just like the periodic table.
Rose whined, a sound of exasperation.
Adamus, please, let's go slowly. We don't know how safe this place is.
She longed for the gentle order of her greenhouse. Adamus sighed, his momentary frustration quickly dissolving. He turned back to join them at the first chamber.
Fine.
Tinky ran her hand along the cold rock, her fingers tracing the rough texture.
This first one is hydrogen. The second one over there must be helium.
At eye level sat a cage-like doorway marked HE-2. No glass, only silvery bars.
Colorless and calm.
Rose whispered, a faint smile touching her lips.
Helium never bonds with anything.
A brass plate beside the bars bore a single switch labeled Energize. Adamus, unable to resist the lure of discovery, flipped it. Coils in the ceiling crackled. The huge ghost-white spheres inside the cell glowed brilliant pink, then red like floating neon orbs, bathing the space in an otherworldly light.
Oh, the excitation spectrum.
Tinky squealed with delight, her eyes wide with fascination.
Add energy. The electrons jump levels and release color on the way back down. Look there.
She pointed to the ribbons of electrons whizzing around the electron shell.
You can see the electrons jumping.
Come on!
Thomas yelled, racing down the ramp to the floor below. his voice echoing with infectious enthusiasm.
You'll see the same trick down here.
Directly under helium sat a chamber called NE-10. He flipped the switch, and a faint orange shimmer danced along their faces, casting them in a warm, ethereal glow. It was beautiful. Rose traced an invisible line down the spiral wall, her mind cataloging the patterns.
Top to bottom, same family. Helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon, radon. Same column, similar behavior.
She moved her finger side to side.
And each level is the next period in the table.
Aria looked around nervously, her practical mind focused on the mission.
Hey guys, I know we're having fun and all, but we've got work to do. We need to find Plumbum and get back in the air.
She squinted to see her watch, the dwindling time a stark reminder of their peril.
We've only got 8 hours left to get this done and get back home.
Okay.
Thomas said, leading them back to the top floor, his energy undimmed.
Dr. Gearsmith said we would find some boots near the entrance. We'll need them in order to extract the neutrons.
Hector sighed, a tired breath escaping him.
And I've got to work on Tranquillum. Arya, I'll need your help.
He mentally ran through the diagnostics he'd need to perform, dreading the complex electrical issues and worried that he would miss something that could put them in danger on their flight back home. That left 4 of us, me included, to complete the mission inside the spiral. Looks can be deceiving. There were 3 pairs of old musty boots tucked away in a corner, covered in a thick layer of dust. Adamus grabbed a pair and shook them out. A plume of dust made him cough, but he grinned.
Looks like I found them.
He slipped his feet into them.
And a perfect fit.
Tinky dusted off a pair, slipped into them, and looked at Rose.
Well, they are a little big, but I suppose they will work.
She bounced on the balls of her feet, testing their clunky weight.
Rose, those are yours. Tania is just here to record.
Rose was uneasy. Atoms and chemistry stuff. That wasn't her thing. She preferred flowers and frogs and things that didn't suddenly explode. She stepped into the clunky boots that were much too big for such a small woman. She felt awkward and out of place.
Why do we need these anyway? And do you really think this will take 3 of us?
I'm not sure. Better safe than sorry.
Mused Thomas, his boots clanking against the concrete floor as he led them across the first level.
We'll need to descend to level 6, and we're looking for Chamber 82.
Rose and Tinky shuffled along behind him, their footsteps echoing in the vast empty space as they complained good-naturedly about the long walk and the blisters they were going to have. They paused for a break to catch their breath, and so Adamus could electrify Argon 18. He flipped the switch and the atoms turned blue, and then gently glowed deep purple.
It's the perfect representation of peace and relaxation. So chill,
Rose said thoughtfully. Adamus urged them on down the ramp to the next element that was safely held prisoner behind a massive bolted hatch labeled K-19.
Potassium.
Thomas patted on the door. Tinky stood on her tiptoes and peered through a small glass peephole. She saw a matte gray blob, utterly dull and boring, sitting inside.
Looks just as harmless as Plumbum.
She said, a hint of curiosity in her voice.
And it is a smaller atom. Look how easy it would be to grab a neutron.
Don't let looks deceive you.
Rose replied, a shiver running down her spine as she imagined the potential consequences.
A single drop of moisture, and we'd be fireworks. Ugh.
Adamus grinned, his eyes sparkling with a mischievous understanding.
Yeah, beauty is only skin deep. The alkalis might look boring and ugly, but their reactivity is no joke.
I find it strange that it sits so close to argon. I mean, they are like complete opposites.
Rose said. Adamus nodded.
The number of electrons sure makes a difference in their attitude.
They hurried on, the urgency of their mission driving them, and finally arrived at Plumbum 82, gray and dull just like potassium, only much larger. The mass of jiggling atoms sat just inside the open archway. No locked doorways, no glass windows, just wide open. As they moved closer, they saw that each nucleus was surrounded by electrons whizzing around so fast that they looked like thin bands of ribbons. A mesmerizing whirl of energy. Surfing on electrons.
Now what?
Rose asked, her voice laced with trepidation as she tightened up the straps on her oversized boots. She felt a surge of anxiety. This was far beyond her comfort zone of nurturing plants. Adamus never wasted time talking. He was all action. He stepped inside and dropped a weighted boot onto the nearest electron band. It clanged, then stuck as if magnetized.
Positively charged souls, just like the protons.
He said, a grin spreading across his face.
Opposites attract, so these negatively charged electron belts, ribbons, whatever you want to call them, are attracted to the boots.
The belt shifted at an angle.
Whoa!
Thomas bent his knees and held out his arms, swaying precariously.
It's like surfing!
Have you surfed before?
Yelled Rose, her eyes wide with alarm.
No, but I think it would be like this.
He laughed, his voice ringing with exhilaration.
But now, how do I get unstuck?
Tinky kneeled down to examine her boots more closely, her mind already dissecting the mechanism.
Yes, there has to be a release so you can free yourself and jump to another electron belt.
The tip of the boots had a strange hinge, as if it was part of a contraption. She stood up.
It's something with the toe of your boot. Maybe flex your foot.
Thomas concentrated, his brow furrowed in thought as he wiggled his toes, stretched his arches, anything that might release his boot. And then suddenly he was free, sliding, slipping, falling. His arms fluttered wildly as he grasped for help, a flash of genuine panic in his eyes.
Jump!
Rose yelled, her voice piercing the air.
Jump! The force of your landing will reactivate the positive charge.
But he had already lost his balance.
He's going to fall,
whispered Tinky, her voice tight with fear. None of them understood how the spiral worked and what the bottom was. Concrete? Hot semiconductors? Empty space? She immediately launched herself onto an icy ribbon of electrons, her boots clenching in place with a satisfying thud. She wriggled her toes, straining to figure out the mechanism to neutralize the charge so she could get close enough to save him.
I'm coming for you, Atomus.
Her big toe clicked something, like shifting a gear, and she was free. She landed on a ribbon closest to her dear friend and held out her hand, her resolve steely. Atomus latched onto her. His mass was a dead weight, but Tinky was stronger than she looked, her muscles straining.
Stomp on the ribbon,
she urged. Around them, 99% of the chamber was empty, a cavernous reminder of atomic reality, a vast, terrifying void. Thomas flailed his leg at the nothingness around him, hoping he would make contact, but his aim was horrible. Tinky's ribbon was quickly shifting upward, and in a few minutes, they would be upside down. Her boots were too big for her, and it wouldn't take much to pull her right out of them. He was going to fall and bring Tinky down with him. A cold wave of despair washed over him. Should he let go and sacrifice himself for her safety?
Stay calm,
Rose screamed as she appeared on a band across from them, her voice cutting through the panic.
Adamus, stop kicking and just think.
She pointed to a thin ribbon that was slowly moving closer.
There, that's your target.
Like a tornado, all thoughts were swept out of his mind. His vision became extraordinarily focused on his immediate situation. It was as if the only thing that existed was him and that thin ribbon. There was no gravity, no Tinky, no dire condition, just stretch, just a little more. His leg was like a rubber band, impossibly extending. Even though he thought he could not possibly reach any further, his foot still kept going, made contact, clink. He was safe. Tinky let go just in time to save herself. She jumped to a new ribbon and caught her breath, her chest heaving.
Thank you, Jesus,
she breathed. a sincere whisper of relief.
That was a close one.
Atomus yelled, his confidence surging back as he launched himself further into the chamber.
Don't you want to take a break for a second?
Rose asked, her voice still a little shaky.
No time!
He yelled. He had the hang of things now. He hopped from belt to belt toward the central nucleus platform. With each leap, the bands hummed, shifting like living rails beneath his feet, a thrilling dance. Halfway across, a metallic clunk echoed behind him. He looked back to see one of Tinky's oversized boots pinwheeling through empty space. She yelped, balanced precariously on one leg, as she watched the boot strike a lower band, lock in place, and start its journey sliding further and further away with the belt's rotation. A wave of frustration washed over her. Her meticulously crafted mission was now hampered by a lost boot.
Tinky, I'm coming. I'll help you get back. Tink, no, don't!
Rose shouted, her voice filled with alarm. Too late! Tinky, driven by instinct and stubbornness, dropped onto the next belt, skidded, but somehow managed to stay upright. Her cheeks blazed with determination. She jumped again, a desperate leap, and almost reached the boot before it twisted and vanished on its orbit around the nucleus, lost to the swirling void.
Go back!
Atomus yelled to her.
I'll get the neutrons.
She had no choice. Rose assisted her, and they jumped their way back to safety. Atomus lingered near a nucleus, captivated by its spectacular beauty. He didn't have time for a full count, but he knew for a fact that Plumbum had 82 sparkling protons. The number of protons, after all, defines the element. How strange, he mused, that these tiny positively charged bits, all looking identical, could magically form every different element simply by changing their quantity. He reached out and poked the vibrating, squishy bit of positive charge. For Atomus, touching the protons felt like touching a piece of God. They held the secret of the universe. They were undeniably special. Sure, the neutrons were crucial, acting like the glue that let all those positive charges cluster together. And of course, electrons were the powerhouse, orchestrating all the reactions, the bright sparks and quiet metabolisms that made life possible. But the proton? The proton was the boss. It decided what was what. Atomus was jolted from his pondering when Rose yelled for him. He quickly tugged off a few neutrons from the current nucleus, then jumped to another, grabbing a few more. In a few moments, Atomus joined them on the balcony, a triumphant grin on his face, clutching a bag of neutrons and Tinky's missing boot.
Neutrons, check. Boot retrieval, check. Sanity, questionable.
He winked. Lithium awaits. A sudden clang reverberated from somewhere above us, followed by muffled voices.
It's probably just Arya coming to check on us,
Mumbled Tinky, but we didn't waste any time wondering. We backtracked, our flashlights carving away the hulking shadows that danced against the rock walls, until we heard Arya's voice, raised in a rare argument with Hector.
Shh.
Whispered Atomus, holding a finger to his lips. We stopped walking a floor below where Hector and Arya stood, their voices carrying clearly.
It's not safe, Hector.
Arya begged, a note of desperation in her tone.
We need it to get back home.
Hector's voice was firm, unyielding.
No, we don't.
The lithium?
Tinky wondered quietly. We took off into our ascent, breathless, and within seconds stumbled onto the second period, the air crackling with unspoken tension. Hector knelt before a sealed hatch marked LI-3, wearing a hastily donned rubberized diving suit that looked bulky and ill-fitting. Wires trailed from his toolkit to the panel's ancient power port, his fingers working with frantic determination.
Thought I could borrow a sliver.
He called, not looking up from fiddling with the lock.
Boost Tranquillum's batteries. It will just take a sec.
Adamus lunged at Hector, his hand slamming down on the toolkit, sending his metal instruments tinkling across the cold stone floor.
No, you know how dangerous this is.
Hector gasped, startled.
Relax. I'm just seeing if I can get the door open.
And then what?
Thomas demanded, his eyes flashing with anger. Arya's voice cut through the gloom, calm but firm.
The old emergency grid is dead. We probably used it up exciting the noble gases, so there isn't enough current to cycle that door open anyway.
But it's the point of the matter.
Rose said, her voice filled with deep disappointment.
If it would have opened, we would all be in danger, Hector.
Hector hesitated, his shoulders slumping slightly.
But I'm in a waterproof suit.
So you packed with this in mind?
Tinky insisted, her voice sharp with accusation as she picked up his scattered metal tools and snugly tucked them away into his tool bag. Rose shook her head as she tugged off the heavy boots.
It was a premeditated pyroblast?
He found the suit over there,
Arya said, checking her watch, her focus shifting back to the dwindling time.
It's obviously made for such an occasion, but still, we can get home on the battery pack, and we're running out of time.
Hector disconnected the leads with a sigh, the spark of his reckless ambition extinguished.
It was worth a try.
Adamus clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture of camaraderie.
Save the heroics for the way out, Pyro Pal. Maybe we can come back another day for some lithium, but not today.
Going home. They boarded the old airship, the interior feeling more like a haven now, and settled in for their trip back home. Tinky mused, her voice soft with wonder.
You know, I didn't realize the atom was made of so much empty space.
She shook her head in amazement.
All that itty-bitty nothingness makes up the building blocks of everything. Those atoms are holding everything together, our entire world.
Adamus twirled his wrench thoughtfully as he stared out at the clouds, his usual exuberance replaced by a quiet contemplation.
Makes you think about faith, doesn't it? The unseen holds the scene.
We didn't speak for a while as the spiral faded behind us, swallowed once more by clouds and silence, a mysterious secret left to its own devices. Tranquillum sailed steady now, its systems humming with renewed life, the storm behind us and the neutrons cradled in containment, still and perfect, a promise of light. When we landed back at Truthspire, the team moved quickly, their exhaustion overshadowed by the urgency of their task. The neutrons were carefully lowered into the heart of the fission reactor and fired at the plutonium core. A buzz, a flicker. And Truthspire was back in full force, lights blazing, machinery whirring, the familiar hum of power filling the air. The world they had built, their experiments, their hopes, their future, breathed again. Cheers broke out, a joyful eruption of relief and triumph. And then we sank back into our chairs, utterly spent, but full of profound relief. Adamus gave a sly smile, a touch of his usual mischief returning.
That's science, that's faith. And thank goodness for plumbum and plutonium.
Cheers for plumbum and plutonium! We laughed, the sound light and joyous as it echoed through the castle walls.